My name is Dean Hua, and this is.
Michelle Kop, really excited to be here today. And for today's topic, we're going to be talking about why agencies fail with Google Ads. So, Dean, let's go ahead and kick it off here.
Yeah, so we have a whole list of bullet points here. I want to start off with digital marketers or digital marketing agencies who do everything. I'm not a big fan of do-it-all agencies and what I mean by that are agencies who specialize in SEO, web dev, organic, social, Facebook, um, Google Ads, and so on and so forth. I'm a big believer, especially in 2023, that really good agencies can only do a couple of those platforms at a time because it's very difficult to find really good talent who can excel at every single channel. So with that as context, the first reason is agencies who try to do everything typically kind of fail at Google Ads because what I've noticed is talking to a lot of agency owners, Google Ads really isn't a big profit driver with a lot of agencies. It's generally SEO and probably web development. So because Google Ads isn't a huge profit driver, it doesn't really become a big priority for them or for their clients, really. So when they take on new clients, I think they're kind of destined to fail from the very beginning. What's your opinion on that?
So, my opinion when it comes to the whole full scale marketing, digital marketing agency is you can't be good at everything. And I've actually worked for agencies that I call it buffet style marketing. They claim to do everything, but then they're not really good at everything. Like to really be successful in this space, you have to be specialized. And that's really bringing it to an analogy here. It's like fine dining and like going to a really nice steakhouse. A nice steakhouse should know how to make really good steak, and they're really specializing and honing in on the way that they sear the meat and the way that they marinate and so forth. And that's what a true Google ad expert or agency should be able to do and deliver. So from my personal experience and from seeing and working with other agencies and also working with clients who've been failed by agencies, this is definitely the number one issue. It's they're trying to do too many things and trying to say that they offer all these different services, but they're a jack of all trades, but a master at none, really.
It's funny you use the whole fine dining analogy. Have you heard my analogy about Cheesecake Factory? Have I
No, I
given you that
haven't.
one? Okay, so I have this analogy about the Cheesecake Factory and digital marketing agencies. If you've ever been to the Cheesecake Factory, it's a hodgepodge of everything, right? Like it's really huge. I don't know how many pages, but it's a really big menu. They serve everything from Japanese to Mexican to modern American to Chinese or whatever. But the reality is that they're really only good at a few of those dishes, and everything else is kind of filler. So I equate that to digital marketing agencies, where most digital marketing agencies, if you're lucky, you're really only good at a couple different channels. Maybe it's just SEO and web development, and everything else, such as Google Ads, tends to be filler. So that's sort of like my analogy as to why many digital marketing agencies fail miserably when it comes to Google Ads. So just a thought. It was just funny that you said you were using the whole steak analogy when I had one about just cheesecake in general. So.
Absolutely. And I think tying it into the challenge too with a lot of these full scale digital marketing agencies brings us to another point, which is a lot of agencies, they'll tend to overload their account managers with way too many accounts. And account managers and just in general, like we know we only have so many hours in the day and so much we can actually do. So when it comes to actually doing a good job for a client and getting results, the challenge is when you're managing 30 to 50 accounts, how can you possibly do a great job? And then it turns it into a set it and forget it approach where you just set it up and then just check on it only when you get notifications that something got disapproved or when a client is complaining than actually going in and checking in. What are your thoughts on this type of approach with overloading account managers, media buyers, and this whole set it and forget it strategy? Or it's not even a strategy, just approach.
Yeah, I definitely cringe at the fact when I always read about media buyers who are overloaded with too many accounts. And the reality is you really can't change this. That's basically the whole business model for much bigger agencies is volume. It's sort of like the McDonald's model where I always say McDonald's, they don't sell the best hamburger, they sell most burgers. And in order for them to make profit, they have to sell the most burgers at a very low quality uh,
Yeah.
level.
And they have
And
an
that's
assembly line in order to get these out as many
quick
as
as
they can.
possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the same with a lot of the bigger agencies where um, these media buyers are part of the assembly line where they have to handle this many accounts. Regardless if it's like 30 to 50 local business accounts or 30 to 50 national accounts, it's just too many. I think the sweet spot is maybe a difference for every agency, but I want to say maybe 15 to 30. But
Mm.
anywhere from 30 to 50 is just way too high in
Yeah.
my experience. And that's part of the reason why I've never wanted to work at bigger agencies was it's just too much.
Yeah, and I also think that that number depends on the level of ad spend, like when it comes to the actual account. Because I've worked at agencies where they only gave us 6 accounts, but we were managing multi-million dollars. And when I worked
Mm.
on Toyota, it was a multi-million dollar account, and it was just only one. So that was a lot easier to manage. It was still a lot of work. Don't get me wrong. There was so many people working on just that one account. But I think what you're referring to is probably more on the local side, right? Like those local Google Ads, like lead gen accounts.
Yeah, one like a pro tip I tell anyone who's watching they're trying to hire an agency, regardless if it's Google Ads or anything else. But with respect to Google Ads, a pro tip I would give is like when you're interviewing agencies, ask them, how many accounts does your media buyer handle on average? And either that salesperson's going to give you a real answer or they're kind of gonna like avoid that answer altogether because they know it's just too many. But I
Yeah.
would ask that question and see what sort of answer you get. Like if the salesperson sits there and says, well, like less than 20, I think that's a good sign. But if it's more than 30, I'd probably look elsewhere, my opinion.
Yeah. 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 I agree with that. I'd say that another question to ask beyond that is asking who's going to be the one managing my account.
Mm.
And I think that that's leading into another topic here. It's who's going to be the one managing? Can I be introduced to the person that's going to be managing the account? Because most of the time, when you're working with these large scale agencies that claim to do PPC or just that claim to do everything in general, they're just going to hand you over to either an intern or a fresh out of college graduate. And while there's nothing wrong with that, they still need to have that level of oversight from a senior level person that's also monitoring budgets, that's also helping and assisting with the actual day-to-day account management and overseeing it. Because I've seen from many years of experience working within the agency side, a lot of the really important tasks do tend to go to the junior level people when it comes to budget management, pacing,
Mm.
actual account setup. So if these things are not being monitored by a senior, then something could massively go wrong and then you're just going to be like out in the dust. And the problem with that too is they could be learning on your dime too. This could be their very first Google Ads account that they're ever managing. So while there's nothing wrong with having a junior level person, you still need to make sure that there is some level of senior oversight, especially if you're paying a decent fee to your agency. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so here's another pro tip, and I get some heat with this, but I do believe it to be true. Usually I give this advice to marketers who are trying to go work for another agency and they're trying to figure out like, is this agency going to give me like fair pay? But I think this advice can be given to prospective clients who are trying to hire an agency. Basically, all you have to do is go to their about page on their website, because usually on the about page is where they show like the entire team or whatnot. So if you see a team where everyone's majority under 30, you can bet anything that they're probably not being paid that well because, and hear me out, because the majority of people under 30, they're just getting started with their career. So they're not going to demand as much in terms of pay as people over 30 with respect to marketing. That's sort of like the advice I've given to people who are trying to get hired by marketing agencies. But I think the same could be applied to clients who are trying to find an agency. Now, that said, that does not mean like people under 30 don't know what they're doing. There's tons of talented under 30 digital marketers out there. But I'm just saying, use that as a signal to try and figure out like, are you going to be hiring like this sort of white collar sweatshop agency, or are you going to be hiring an agency that's truly going to give you the time that you need or the attention that you need with respect to your campaign?
Yeah, and I think tying into that, another red flag or issue that I have heard of and that I've actually seen too is just agencies that will just blanket give a price without even trying to understand what your business goals are, without understanding where the starting point is. You can go to their website and see a menu of a tier, pretty much $599, $1,000, $1,500, like a tier. And again, I think that goes back to like the whole McDonald's, the whole McDonald's model. There's nothing wrong with that. But then the problem is they're not really trying to understand your business and your current state. And they're just going to give you a quote and then assume that you're going to judge them based off of a quote, just pretty much like you would in terms of hiring a contractor for your house. Just look for the lowest bid and that's it. No, you need to look at reviews. You need to look at other things. And beyond that, tell me what you're actually going to do. Because someone that's charging $500 a month versus someone charging $2,000 a month hopefully would have some type of difference in strategy or something. But what are your thoughts on this approach of just blanket giving prices? And do you agree with making sure that you get some type of strategic insight before you start actually working with a professional?
Yeah. Again, I'm not a big fan of like blanket pricing. I think that motto generally applies, and there are exceptions to the rule, but I think generally it applies to agencies who are working on volume, right? When you're working on volume, you don't really have time to offer the sort of customized, nuanced approach to every prospective client that comes through the door. So that's why you have these blanket pricing models, whereas people like you and I, we're much smaller in scale, so we can kind of afford, while being small, we can afford being much more nuanced in terms of our pricing and going through that fact-finding process. Which leads me to another point. I think another reason why a lot of agencies fail with Google Ads is when they take on a new client, they don't spend a lot of time with discovery or fact-finding. I've taken on clients where the moment the agency brought them on board, the media buyer went straight to just setting up the account and then letting it run with however long that takes. And I was really surprised by that because every time I take on a new client, the first thing I do is we arrange for a kickoff meeting. Usually that kickoff meeting is anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes. And during that kickoff meeting, I'm spending time trying to understand their business model. And I'll give you a perfect example. Let's just say chiropractors. Like I have several chiropractor clients, but not every chiropractor operates the same way. Some are insurance-based where they take insurance. Others are completely cash-based. And within those cash-based models, there's a lot of nuance to that as well. But regardless of their business model, I always spend 60 minutes getting them on Zoom and trying to understand their model, what the lifetime value of a patient is, how they value a good client, what's a bad client. We work through messaging as well because that's really important when we try to develop the landing page, which is really critical to Google advertising. So I think like another mistake that a lot of, at least bigger agencies make, is they don't spend any time onboarding new clients. What do you think?
I agree. Actually, I take it a little bit of a step further, even before I even onboard them, I'll have them fill out a questionnaire. So that's like the first barrier to entry to even work with me. You have to fill out a questionnaire. It's about a 10-minute questionnaire to fill out, pretty much outlining their business, their problems, what their current ad spend is, where their biggest pain points are, and basically what they need with my assistance. And then from there, I'll go and I'll evaluate. And I don't take on just any client either. I'm very selective about the types of but a lot of room for improvement beyond just increasing the budget and then from there doing other things that the client doesn't want to do. So then at that point, then I'll offer some other small projects instead of a long-term management. But I also think like it's really important just upfront to know what I'm walking into before I actually start collecting payment and whatnot and start working with a client. So yeah, that's definitely a critical piece. And understanding too, like, where's your starting point? Like, I also do like just a high level audit of their account just to see like, oh, are the conversions set up properly? What type of keyword match types are they using? Is this just a refurbishment, like complete refurbishment, or is it just small tweaks that don't really need a lot? And then from there, I can give a better idea of where our starting point would be. Now, sometimes I'll walk into an account where it's just a complete mess. The client doesn't even know what they want. At that point, then I try to help guide the client. But if they're not being receptive, then it's a no-go in terms of moving forward to work together. Because we have to be on the same page. It's just not really a good a business partnership if they don't agree with what you're saying, and it can get really messy that way. So yeah, that's that for that topic. Anything else on the fact finding?
No, I think that's it. You pretty much covered it. So let's kind of move on to the next on the list. How do you feel about agencies and their understanding or lack thereof when it comes to like automated bidding strategies? The reason why I ask this is that, as you know, Google over the last several years, they've been making a hard push towards smart bidding strategies, whether it's max conversions, target ROAS, target CPA, and so on and so forth. And I think there's a lot of agencies who still don't have a really firm understanding of those types of bidding strategies. Do you think that lack of understanding creates these sort of problems where they're failing with Google Ads for their clients?
Absolutely. I think the number one issue too, like when I'll take over an account that is already being run by some larger scale volume agency, is they're using specific bid strategies that they're not ready to be using. So for instance, maximize conversions. If they don't achieve a certain amount of volume in conversions, then you're just really overspending. So that's really key to just be aware of the different bid strategies and understanding the best use cases for when to use them. So I think, we just need to understand all the different bid strategies and see when would be the best approach to go ahead and use it, because they're probably getting hammered by their Google reps, pushing them to use maximize conversions, target CPA, performance max, which is the new shiny object that like every Google rep is really trying to get out there. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think a major red flag, I've seen this over and over again whenever I take on clients, regardless if they did it themselves or they hired an agency, is just going back to max conversions. From like the moment they launch a campaign, they get on the whole max conversions bidding strategy. And that's like a major red flag, because just like you said, in order for max conversions to work correctly, you have to have enough conversion data in order for it to optimize. But the problem is when you have a new campaign, you have no conversion data. So that's a major red flag. What I always tell clients is before you switch over to before you start with max conversions, you should probably start with max clicks or manual CPC just to get enough conversion data to feed that algorithm. So when I see agencies or clients who automatically hop onto max conversions without kind of warming up the campaign, if you will, I think that's a major red flag and really a sign of an agency that's probably not specialized within Google Ads. Maybe they're sort of a do-it-all agency, whether it's
Yeah,
SEO
yeah.
or whatnot.
And I also have to say too that the name is really tricky. It is designed to get you to want to choose it, right? Like everyone, we all want to maximize our conversions. So that's naturally the one that you would want to choose. So, and you wouldn't want to manual CPC. That's too much work. That's too much to manage, right? So they're trying to push you to maximize conversions, and that's like the number one recommendation when you actually set up your smart campaign or expert campaign or whatever campaign that you're setting up. You're pushed into that. So in order to change it, there's like little tricky settings that you have to go into in order to update it. But yeah, the name is really misleading and can cause a lot of confusion.
Yeah, and then following along those lines, I think a lot of agencies have this sort of set it and forget it mentality where they'll turn on the campaign, they'll launch, and maybe some of them are very successful in the very beginning, but because they're managing so many different accounts, they probably won't touch that campaign for several months. And then what ends up happening is 2 or 3 months later, performance tanks because they weren't monitoring what was going on with that account because they were managing 30 other accounts. So I think a lot of agencies, especially those that operate at volume, they have this sort of set it and forget it mentality. And I think that's probably the wrong way to go about doing things.
Yeah, exactly. And then the problem with that too is when you're operating off of volume, you don't really have as much margin. So you're going to be hiring cheaper people, cheaper labor. So therefore it's going to be inexperienced media buyers, and it's that trickle effect. So you're having people learn on your dime, unfortunately.
Yeah, totally agree. Anything else, or do you want to move on?
Oh, let's go ahead and move on.
Okay. How do you feel about agencies that outsource to other agencies, specifically like white labeling agencies?
Well, I'm not completely against it as long as as long as the other agency is specialized in in Google Ads. If we're talking about this Google Ads in general, I've actually been a white label partner for a couple agencies in the past. It's not a primary source of income right now, but it's something that has been really great for me to pick up additional clients and income in the background. But as long as as long as the white labeler is an expert in that area, I think it's completely fine. But if you're outsourcing to another Cheesecake Factory or you're outsourcing to another buffet style do-it-all agency, it's bound to fail.
Yeah, I'm not against agencies outsourcing to other agencies, or much less white labeling agencies. I think the issue that I have with a lot of white labeling agencies is that a lot of them, they're obviously going to give a discount to the agency that's hiring them, because the agency that's hiring them have to make their margins as well. But the problem with the whole white labeling agency model is that, again, they're working on volume, right? You're going to sacrifice some margins because you're being hired by the other agency. So in order to make up those margins, you have to do more volume.
Yeah.
And like we just been talking about with McDonald's, if you're going to do volume like McDonald's, you have to accept the fact that your level of quality isn't going to be that great. So that's the problem I have when agencies outsource to other white labeling agencies, is that most of these white labeling agencies are also working on volume, and so quality goes down quite a bit.
Yeah. Personally, for me, if I were a client and I was talking to an agency and I found out, well, I don't know if agencies would reveal that they're working with a white labeler, but I wouldn't be okay with an agency that I'm working with outsourcing. But I don't know how many companies actually do reveal that they're white labeling when they're working with
I mean,
clients.
I wouldn't hesitate to ask, to be honest. Like if I was a client, and most clients don't know this, but if I knew about this stuff, I'd probably ask my agency, "Are you outsourcing
Yeah,
to other agencies or whatnot?"
yeah,
And
yeah.
just take that into account. I don't think it should be like if I found out my agency was hiring another agency, that I would not make a decision based purely on that. But I do think it should probably go into your overall decision making process when you're factoring everything.
Okay.
What else?
That's it for that topic. I want to talk about being forward thinking and agencies that keep up with trends and just in general. What would you say is really important in terms of keeping up with the latest and greatest updates with Google Ads? And have you come across situations where you've managed accounts and you notice that this agency that's working on it is just using completely outdated PPC lead generation strategies?
Yeah, I mean those sort of red flags. That's generally a sign of agencies that kind of do everything, and maybe their bread and butter is like focused on SEO or organic or whatnot, and maybe every 3 or 4 months their PPC department is kind of keeping up with the trends, right? Now that said, I do want to say the one thing I love about paid search is that you don't necessarily have to follow it as intensely as you do with other industries, meaning I don't have to be kept up to date every single week on paid search because I don't think the industry is changing that much. But I'll give you one example that I wrote out maybe 6 to 12 months ago is when Performance Max really kind of got introduced to the masses. And you and I both know that Performance Max, that's a model that's more ideally suited for e-commerce than lead generation. But I did notice a lot of agencies who are doing lead gen were using Performance Max and their campaigns were tanking and they didn't understand why. And I think that's a good sign right there of agencies that don't really have a macro understanding of these sort of smart bidding strategies that Google is rolling out. So when they're using Performance Max, which is a model built for e-commerce rather than lead gen, that's a sign of an agency that's maybe not keeping up on the latest and the greatest.
Yeah, and I don't know if some of these agencies are like that are using PMax for lead gen. They're just doing it to show clients that they're trying to adapt. But at the same time, you need to have a point of view as a agency or as a professional that's being hired. You need to have a strong point of view of whether this thing works or not. And yeah, I've audited accounts where I've seen that they set up just like one Performance Max campaign and charge a large retainer fee. And
Ooh,
and the thing is, it looks like it's performing well, but then when you're looking behind the scenes, it's all driven by brand
brand.
terms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I don't really have anything else. You?
no, that's it. I think that's it. Let's go ahead and wrap up the Google Ads Lead Gen show, and we'll catch you guys next time.